The massive Zarthian ship hung above New York City like a shimmering silver cloud. It had appeared 3 days ago, causing initial panic until the aliens broadcast their peaceful intentions in perfect English. They called themselves the Zarthian Collective, a peaceful alliance of species that had achieved interstellar travel centuries ago. Now they had come to welcome Earth into the galactic community. Grace Morgan smoothed her navy blue diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. As the lead Earth diplomat selected by the United Nations, she carried the weight of humanity's first impression on her shoulders. Next to her stood Dr. Alan Porter, a xenobiologist with kind eyes and nervous hands that couldn't stop adjusting his glasses. Behind them both, Captain Jack Miller stood at parade rest, his marine dress uniform immaculate, his face revealing nothing. "Remember," Grace whispered to her team as they prepared to board the shuttle that would take them to the Zarthian vessel. "We represent all of humanity today." Jack nodded once, his eyes scanning the alien craft with professional interest. Unlike the scientists and diplomats who bubbled with excitement, he was here for security and protocol. The Marines had insisted on sending at least one military representative, though the politicians had argued against it. Nobody wanted the aliens to think humans were aggressive. The shuttle ride was smooth and silent. When the doors opened, they stepped into a vast chamber with walls that seemed to shift colors like the inside of a seashell. 3 tall aliens waited for them. The Zarthians stood over 7 feet tall with slender bodies and 6 limbs, 4 arms and 2 legs. Their skin shimmered with a blue-green iridescence and their large eyes had no pupils, just swirling patterns of gold and amber. They wore simple white garments that flowed like water. "Welcome, humans," the central figure spoke, its voice musical and light. "I am Ambassador Cluthak. We are honored to make your acquaintance." Grace stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we thank you for this historic meeting." The aliens exchanged looks that Jack couldn't quite interpret. Something like amusement, perhaps? "Your species has advanced remarkably considering your limitations," Cluthak said, gesturing to their bodies. "Evolving on such a harsh world with only 4 limbs and fragile frames. Truly impressive." Dr. Porter leaned forward eagerly. "We find your physiology fascinating as well. The additional limbs must provide significant advantages." "Indeed," another Zarthian responded. "Efficiency is natural to us. But please join us for refreshment. We have prepared nutrition suitable for your biology." As they followed the aliens through glowing corridors, Jack noticed how the Zarthians moved, fluid and graceful, but also somehow cautious. Their ship contained no visible weapons or security measures. They truly seemed to be a peaceful species. The meeting room overlooked Earth, the blue planet spinning slowly beneath them. Food was served, fruits and vegetables grown in the ships, gardens modified to be compatible with human digestion. "Your world is quite beautiful," Cluthak said, though rather intense. "The gravity, the atmospheric pressure, the temperature extremes. We had to adjust our environmental suits considerably just to walk comfortably among you. We call Earth a Goldilocks planet," Dr. Porter explained. "Just right for us. Just right. For you, perhaps." Another Zarthian named Velnar laughed softly. "To most spacefaring species, your home would be considered a death world." Jack noticed Grace stiffen slightly at the condescending tone. "Tell us about your civilization," Grace redirected politely. "We're eager to learn about galactic society." Cluthak's eyes swirled faster, apparently their version of enthusiasm. "The collective spans 23 solar systems and includes 14 sentient species. We have maintained peace for over 15 centuries through cooperation and shared resources." 1,500 years without war? Jack spoke for the first time, his voice measured. "Impressive." The Zarthians turned to him, seeming to truly notice the Marine for the first time. "You wear a different covering than your companions," Cluthak observed. "Does this indicate a separate function?" Grace intervened smoothly. "Captain Miller represents our protective services. It's customary in diplomatic meetings to have security personnel present." "Protection? From what dangers?" Velnar asked, genuinely confused. It's standard protocol, Jack replied simply. Fascinating, Cluthac said, though his tone suggested something closer to concern. Yes, we've studied your broadcasts. Your species does seem to have an unusual preoccupation with defense. The diplomatic meetings continued for days. The humans were shown incredible technologies, clean energy systems, advanced medical equipment, faster-than-light communication devices. But Jack noticed a pattern in how the Zarthians spoke to them, like adults explaining simple concepts to bright but ultimately limited children. During the fourth day of negotiations, the true nature of the Zarthians' offer became clear. We would be pleased to extend protected status to Earth, Cluthac announced in what was clearly meant to be a generous offer. Grace frowned. Protected status? We were hoping for full Alliance membership. The Zarthians exchanged those looks again. Definitely. Amusement, Jack decided, mixed with something like pity. Full membership requires certain developmental milestones, Velnar explained gently. Your species is quite young. You've only recently stopped your internal conflicts. We haven't stopped them everywhere, Jack pointed out quietly. The room grew silent. You mean to say, Cluthac asked slowly, that humans still engage in organized violence against each other? Dr. Porter jumped in. Much less than in our past. Most nations live in peace now. Most? Another Zarthian whispered, horrified. Grace, try to salvage the situation. We've made tremendous progress. Our global cooperation is admirable, Cluthac interrupted, but confirms our assessment. Protected status would give you access to some technologies and trade routes while providing you time to mature as a species. Jack saw the frustration on Grace's face. They were being patted on the head and told to come back when they were older. Later, in their private quarters on the ship, Grace paced angrily. They think we're children. Dangerous children, she fumed. Dr. Porter nodded sadly. Their civilization never developed along military lines. They see our history as proof. We're unstable. Jack sat cleaning his service pistol, the only weapon the Zarthians had reluctantly allowed on board. They've never had to fight for survival, he said quietly. They've never faced extinction. We have, countless times. It shaped us. That doesn't make us inferior, Grace insisted. No, Jack agreed, reassembling his weapon with practiced hands. Just different. They'll understand eventually. He couldn't know how soon that understanding would come, or that it would begin on a remote research station on Jupiter's moon Europa, when an alien life form would teach the Zarthians exactly why humans had learned to fight. 3 months after first contact, the Europa research station orbited Jupiter's ice-covered moon. The joint human-Zarthian facility studied the strange life forms discovered in Europa's vast subsurface ocean. Captain Jack Miller had been assigned, there with a small team of Marines as part of the security detail, much to the Zarthians' continued discomfort. The station was a marvel of combined technology, human ingenuity merged with Zarthian advanced materials. Through thick viewing windows, researchers could see the swirling storms of Jupiter against the blackness of space. Dr. Susan Hayes peered through a microscope at a tiny organism collected from Europa's ocean. As the lid human xenobiologist, she worked closely with the Zarthian scientists despite their tendency to explain simple concepts to her, as if she were a student rather than a colleague. Fascinating cellular structure, she murmured to herself. Nearby, Zarthian scientist Murtaugh nodded. Yes, quite interesting for such a primitive life form. The amino acid chains are surprisingly complex for a species from such a harsh environment. Susan bit back a sigh. After 3 months, she still couldn't tell if the Zarthians realized how condescending they sounded. At that moment, Captain Miller entered the lab for his regular security rounds. He nodded to the scientists and checked the containment protocols, as he did twice daily. Is all this really necessary, Captain? Murtaugh asked, gesturing to Miller's sidearm and the security cameras he was inspecting. We're studying microscopic organisms. Standard procedure, Miller replied with the patience he'd developed over months of similar questions. We treat unknown biological samples as potentially hazardous until proven otherwise. Such a fearful approach to science, another Zarthian commented. In the collective, we embrace discovery without such militaristic precautions. Before Miller could respond, an alarm blared through the station. Red lights flashed, and the facility's AI announced in a calm voice, "Containment breach in Deep Ocean Sample Lab. All personnel initiate emergency protocols." Miller's hand went to his communicator. "Report." "Sir," came the voice of Private Frank Lee, stationed in the monitoring center. "Something big just broke out of the pressure tanks in Lab 3. It's not microscopic, sir." "Evacuation procedures," Miller ordered immediately. "All civilians to the escape pods. Marines to Lab 3 for containment." The Zarthians stood frozen, their golden eyes wide with confusion and fear. "What is happening?" Murtaugh asked, his voice trembling. "There must be some mistake. The deep samples were all single-celled organisms." "Move now," Miller said firmly, guiding both Susan and the Zarthians toward the exit. "Head to Emergency Station Alpha." Susan grabbed her tablet. "The sample from the thermal vent area. We never fully analyzed its growth potential in lower pressure environments." Over the station intercom, they heard screaming. Then Private Lee's voice came through Miller's communicator again. "Sir, it's big, like, really big now, and fast. It's absorbed 2 Zarthian researchers already. Bullets slow it down, but don't stop it." Miller made a quick decision. "Susan, get the Zarthians to the escape pods. I'm going to Lab 3. "I'm coming with you," Susan insisted. "You need someone who understands what this thing might be." Miller wanted to argue, but recognized the logic. "Stay behind me." Together they raced through the station's corridors while Murtaugh led the other Zarthians toward the escape pods. When Miller and Susan reached Lab 3, they found chaos. The creature had grown from a microscopic sample to something the size of a small car. It looked like a shifting mass of translucent blue gel with darker cores swimming inside it. 2 Marines fired at it, while a third dragged an injured colleague to safety. "It absorbs organic matter to grow," Susan said, scanning it with her instruments. "And it doesn't like bullets, but they're not doing enough damage." Miller assessed the situation quickly. "Corporal Garcia, get Rodriguez to medical. Lee, what's the evacuation status?" "First pod launched with most of the Zarthians, sir," Lee reported. "Second pod is loading now, but there's a problem. The third pod's launch mechanism is jammed." Miller looked at the station schematics on his tablet. 3 escape pods, each holding 20 people. With the first pod gone and the second loading, they had a problem. There were 15 people still unaccounted for beyond the second pod's capacity. "We need something stronger than bullets," Miller said, watching the creature absorb a lab table, growing larger. "Hayes, what hurts this thing?" Susan analyzed her readings. "Extreme heat might work, or the station's industrial cleaning solution. It's basically concentrated bleach." "Maintenance closet, East Corridor," Miller decided. "Martinez, keep firing to hold its attention. Everyone else fall back to the closet." They retrieved the cleaning solution and maintenance flamethrowers used for sterilizing external equipment. When they returned, the creature had doubled in size and was oozing toward the main corridor. "If it reaches the central hub, it could spread throughout the station," Susan warned. Miller nodded grimly. "We make our stand here." The Marines formed a line, flamethrowers ready. When the creature approached, they unleashed streams of fire. The thing recoiled, parts of it hardening and cracking under the heat. Susan directed maintenance drones to spray the cleaning solution into the cracks. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched sound that made them cover their ears. But it was working. "Evacuation update," Miller demanded into his communicator. "Second pod away, sir," came the reply. "Third pod still jammed. Engineers working on it." Miller made calculations in his head. With the remaining crew and his Marines, they needed that third pod. A group of Zarthians appeared at the far end of the corridor, led by Sub-Commander Vexler, who had stayed behind to help with evacuation. "The mechanism is beyond repair," Vexler reported, his usual calm shattered. "We cannot launch the final pod." Miller looked at his team, then at the creature, which was regrouping despite their attacks. How many people left on the station? He asked. 23, Vexler replied. The escape shuttle can hold 20 with life support limitations. Miller nodded. Get everyone to the shuttle bay. Hayes, you go with them. What about you? Susan asked, already knowing the answer. 3 of us will stay to ensure containment until you're clear, Miller said. Then we'll use the emergency beacon and wait for rescue. Vexler stared at Miller. You would remain behind? The creature might break through. That's why we're staying, Miller said simply. To make sure it doesn't follow you. The Zarthian seemed unable to process this decision. But you might die. Miller met his gaze steadily. Part of the job, sir. As the evacuation proceeded, Miller and 2 volunteers, Sergeants Kate Dawson and Pete Rivera, held the line against the creature. They rigged flamethrowers to maintenance drones for constant fire and set up a barricade of cleaning solution. From the shuttle bay, Susan contacted Miller. We're ready for launch. Go, Miller ordered. We've got this contained. As the shuttle pulled away from the station, Vexler watched through the viewport. He saw 3 small human figures fighting an impossible battle against a creature from the depths of an alien ocean. They were probably going to die, yet they had chosen this fate willingly to save others, including aliens who had treated them as lesser beings. For the first time, Vexler wondered if the Zarthian collective had completely misunderstood humans after all. 1 month after the Europa incident, Captain Jack Miller sat in the human embassy on Earth. Against all odds, he and his Marines had survived. They had contained the creature long enough for a rescue ship to arrive with proper equipment to destroy. Now they were being called heroes by both humans and Zarthians alike. Miller looked up as a tall Zarthian entered the room. He recognized Sub-Commander Vexler, who had been on the station during the attack. The alien looked different somehow. Less certain, more thoughtful. Captain Miller, Vexler said, bowing slightly. I am pleased to see you recovered from your injuries. Miller stood and offered his hand, a gesture the Zarthians had initially found strange but now attempted to mimic. Thank you, Sub-Commander. What brings you here today? Vexler's golden eyes swirled slowly, indicating deep thought. I wish to speak with you about what happened on Europa. There are things I do not understand about human behavior. Miller gestured to a chair. I'll answer what I can. The Zarthian sat awkwardly, his long limbs folding like a praying mantis. You chose to remain behind. You and your soldiers faced likely death to ensure others escaped. We did our job, Miller said simply. But why? Vexler pressed. The Zarthian personnel were not your species. Some had even been less than respectful to humans. Miller considered his words carefully. In the Marines, we have a principle. Leave no one behind. It doesn't matter who they are. If they're under our protection, we protect them. This is military training? Vexler asked, leaning forward. Partly training, partly culture, Miller explained. Throughout human history, warriors have often lived by codes of honor. The specific rules change, but the basic ideas stay the same. Warriors? Vexler repeated the word slowly. The Zarthian collective has no warriors. We have had no need for them in 15 centuries. Miller nodded. That's an impressive achievement. But before you entered the escape shuttle, Vexler continued, Dr. Hayes mentioned that you had combat experience. She said you had seen action in several conflicts. I have been researching human history since then. The Zarthian's eyes swirled faster. Your species has been fighting wars for your entire recorded history. Is this correct? Yes, Miller acknowledged. We've had periods of peace, but yes, conflict has been a constant in human development. And you personally have participated in these wars? I've served in 3 major operations, yes. Vexler seemed to struggle with his next question. How does your species continue to function with such violence in your past and present? Miller thought about it. We adapt. We learn. We try to be better. Better at fighting? Vexler asked, confused. Better at everything, including when fighting is necessary and when it isn't, Miller clarified. For example, after particularly destructive wars, Humans created rules for warfare. Rules for warfare? Vexlor repeated, clearly struggling with the concept. Miller nodded. The Geneva Conventions, for instance. Rules about how to treat prisoners, prohibitions against targeting civilians, restrictions on certain types of weapons. The Zarthian was silent for nearly a minute. You created rules for how to kill each other. We created rules to limit suffering when conflict happens, Miller corrected gently. We recognized that wars might still occur, so we tried to make them less barbaric. And these rules are followed? Miller's expression grew more serious. Not always. When they're broken, we call those actions war crimes. They're considered among the worst things a person or nation can do. Vexler's eyes had stopped swirling completely, a sign of deep shock in Zarthians. Your species codified violence, then created punishments for violating your own codes of violence? That's one way to put it, Miller admitted. This is... Vexlor struggled for words. This is beyond my comprehension. The Zarthian stood abruptly and paced the room. The collective council believed humans were simply underdeveloped, that with time and guidance you would outgrow your primitive tendencies toward conflict. But this suggests something far more complex. Miller watched the alien process this information. We've been dealing with conflict for thousands of years. We've had to develop complex responses to it. Yes, Vexlor said quietly, including sacrifice. Like on Europa? That's right. Our scientists believed your physical form evolved on a harsh planet, Vexlor continued. But they failed to consider how your minds evolved as well. You expect danger. You plan for it. You have protocols. When the creature attacked, all Zarthians froze. We had no response prepared. Miller nodded. Different evolutionary paths. I have told the collective council about what happened, Vexler said. About how you stayed behind. About how your Marines fought methodically while we panicked. They are reconsidering their assessment of humans. Miller raised an eyebrow. Oh? The concept of war crimes has particularly disturbed many council members, Vexlor admitted. The idea that your species has thought so deeply about violence that you categorize and regulate it, it suggests a capacity for both great destruction and great restraint. The Zarthian turned to face Miller directly. Captain, would you be willing to address the council? To explain human military history and these rules of war? Miller looked surprised. Me? Wouldn't a historian or diplomat be better? No, Vexler said firmly. The council needs to hear from a warrior who lives by these codes. Someone who has both fought and chosen not to fight when appropriate. Someone who understands the balance. Miller considered the request. If my superiors approve, I'd be willing. Thank you, Vexler said. There is one more thing I must ask. During my research, I encountered a human concept I found disturbing yet fascinating. Your species speaks of something called the warrior's paradox. Can you explain this? Miller nodded slowly. It's the idea that those who understand war best are often those who most want to avoid it. Those who have seen combat firsthand rarely glorify it. Yet you continue to train for it, Vexler observed. We train so we're ready when there's no other choice, Miller corrected. The best outcome is never having to use that training. Si vis pacem, para bellum, a new voice said from the doorway. Both turned to see Grace Morgan, the diplomat from the first contact team. She smiled apologetically for interrupting. It's an ancient human saying, she explained to Vexler. It means, if you want peace, prepare for war. A paradox indeed, the Zarthian murmured. The universe isn't always peaceful, Miller said quietly. The Europa incident proved that. Sometimes threats emerge that can't be negotiated with. Vexler's eyes began swirling again, but differently than before, more purposefully. The council meeting is in 3 days. After that, I believe the collective will be formally changing Earth's status from protected to allied. As the Zarthian departed, Grace turned to Miller with wide eyes. Allied status? That's a complete reversal of their position. What did you say to him? Miller shrugged. Just the truth about who we are. For better or worse. What neither of them knew was that Vexilor's report was already spreading throughout the galactic community. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive curiosities were suddenly re-evaluating them. The beings who had created rules for warfare, who had categorized war crimes, who would sacrifice themselves for others. These were not simple primitives. They were complex, dangerous, honorable, and utterly unlike anything the peaceful collective had encountered before. 6 months after Captain Miller's meeting with the Zarthian Council, the galaxy faced a new threat. A species called the Drax had begun aggressive expansion into territories along the edge of Zarthian space. They were reptilian beings with tough scales and sharp teeth, evolved from pack hunters on a resource-poor world. Miller, now promoted to major, stood in the command center of the UES Horizon, Earth's newest military vessel. On the main screen, reports showed Drax ships approaching a joint human-Zarthian colony on the planet Vega Prime. They're not responding to hails, Communications Officer Steve Russell reported. Miller nodded grimly. They didn't respond to diplomatic outreach either. The pattern is consistent with their previous attacks. Admiral Olivia Bennett, the fleet commander, studied the tactical display. A small woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, she had spent 40 years in space service. The Zarthian ships are in defensive formation, she noted. But their weapons, systems aren't designed for combat. They're primarily for clearing space debris and asteroid defense, Miller pointed to the display. The Drax know that. It's why they're targeting Zarthian territories first. They've already destroyed 3 outposts in the past month. When the Drax had first appeared, the Zarthian collective had tried their usual approach, offers of trade, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation. The Drax had responded by destroying an unmanned research station. When the Zarthians sent diplomats, the Drax had killed them and sent their ship back on autopilot with a simple message. The strong take what they need. Now, after more attacks, the collective had reluctantly accepted Earth's offer of military support. The door to the command center slid open, and Ambassador Cluthak entered with Sub-Commander Vexilor. Both Zarthians looked uncomfortable on the military vessel, their eyes swirling with anxiety. Major Miller, Cluthak greeted him formally. Admiral Bennett, we have received word that the Drax fleet will reach Vega Prime in 6 hours. We'll be there in 4, Bennett assured him. Our ships can intercept them before they reach the colony. And then? Vexilor asked quietly. Miller and Bennett exchanged glances. This was the difficult part. The Zarthians still struggled with the concept of military engagement. We will attempt communication once more, Bennett explained patiently. If they refuse to withdraw, we will disable their engines and weapon systems if possible. And if that is not possible, Cluthak pressed. Miller answered directly. Then we will do what is necessary to protect the colony. The Zarthians' distress was visible in their rapidly swirling eyes. You think like them, Cluthak observed nervously. Like the Drax? No, Bennett corrected firmly. We think like beings who have faced existential threats before. We've spent millennia fighting each other. Now we'll fight for you. Later, in the ship's strategy room, human and Zarthian officers gathered around a holographic display of the Vega system. Miller led the briefing, explaining the defensive plan to protect the colony's 15,000 inhabitants, both human and Zarthian. The Drax use pack hunting tactics in space just as their ancestors did on land, Miller explained. They send smaller ships to probe defenses, then attack perceived weak points in force. He pointed to the colony's orbital stations. We'll position our heaviest ships here and here, with fighter squadrons ready to respond to flanking maneuvers. Vexilor watched in fascination as Miller anticipated the enemy's likely moves and created countermeasures for each. When the Zarthian pointed this out, Miller smiled slightly. In the Marines, we have a saying, the enemy gets a vote. It means we need to think about what they want and how they'll try to get it, not just what we want. The Zarthian scientists who had been assigned as liaisons were especially interested in human tactical thinking. Your species seems to have an instinctive understanding of conflict, one observed. You predict behavior patterns we cannot see. Not instinctive, Miller corrected. Learned. Through thousands of years of warfare, we've developed ways of thinking about strategy and tactics. Admiral Bennett added, we study our own history to learn what works and what doesn't. Every human conflict taught us something, even the terrible ones, especially the terrible ones. When the horizon reached Vega Prime, they found the colony in panic. The Drax had sent a message promising to take the planet's resources and enslave its people. For the peaceful Zarthians, this was incomprehensible cruelty. Earth's fleet took position between the approaching Drax ships and the colony. As predicted, the Drax sent smaller vessels ahead to test the defenses. They expect the Zarthians, Miller observed from his tactical station. They don't expect us. The first engagement was brief but decisive. When the Drax scout ships approached, Earth fighters intercepted them with surprising speed and coordination. 2 were disabled, 1 destroyed when it refused to stand down and fired on a medical transport. On the main Drax vessel, their commander watched in confusion as his scouts were neutralized in minutes. These were not the passive Zarthians they had easily overpowered before. Admiral Bennett opened a channel to the Drax flagship. This is Admiral Olivia Bennett of the United Earth Defense Force. The colony of Vega Prime is under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Drax commander, a scarred reptilian with yellow eyes, hissed angrily on screen. Who are you to interfere? The Zarthians are weak. The weak do not deserve resources. We are their allies, Bennett replied calmly. And we are not weak. The Drax ships regrouped and launched a full attack. They expected to overwhelm the defenders with numbers and ferocity, as they had with other peaceful species. Instead, they encountered a coordinated defense that anticipated their moves. Miller directed fighter squadrons to intercept Drax ships, attempting to flank the main defense line. When 3 enemy vessels targeted a Zarthian science station, human ships formed a protective barrier and returned fire with precise shots to disable rather than destroy. From the colony below, Zarthian, civilians watched in awe as humans fought with both remarkable skill and restraint. They disabled ships when possible, and only destroyed those that presented immediate threats to civilian targets. After 2 hours of battle, the Drax retreated, having lost a third of their fleet while the human Zarthian forces suffered only minor damage. On the horizon's bridge, a cheer went up from the human crew. The Zarthians looked stunned. You knew what they would do, Cluthac said to Miller and Bennett. Every move, every tactic, you anticipated it. Their behavior follows patterns. We've seen before, Bennett explained. Aggressors often use similar approaches, whether they're human or alien. Vexler stepped forward. The Collective Council will want a full report. This changes everything about our understanding of humans. Miller raised an eyebrow. How so? We thought your warrior nature was a primitive trait you would outgrow, Vexler admitted. Now we see it differently. Your capacity for both violence and restraint, for both aggression and protection, it is not primitive at all. It is highly evolved. As the Zarthian spoke, alerts flashed on the tactical display. More Drax ships had been detected entering the system. They're returning with reinforcements, Miller noted. Bennett nodded calmly. We expected that too. Vexelor looked from one human to another, finally understanding. The species the Zarthians had once dismissed as harmless primitives had become their most valuable allies, not despite their warrior nature, but because of it. 1 year after the Battle of Vega Prime, representatives from 27 galactic species gathered on Earth. It was unprecedented. Never before had the central meeting of the Galactic Council been held on a planet so new to interstellar society. But Earth was no longer seen as just another world of curious primitives. The Grand Assembly Hall in Geneva had been expanded for the occasion. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and biological compositions filled the room. Some floated in special atmosphere, tanks. Others stood on multiple legs, and some appeared as shimmering fields of energy rather than solid matter. Major Jack Miller adjusted his dress uniform as he prepared to enter. Now serving as Earth's military liaison to the Council, he had been asked to speak today. Admiral Bennett stood beside him, reviewing her notes one final time. "Nervous?" she asked with a small smile. Miller shook his head. Public speaking doesn't compare to facing a Drax battle cruiser. They entered the hall together. At the center of the room, Ambassador Cluthac and Grace Morgan were already seated. The human and Zarthian diplomats had worked tirelessly over the past year to strengthen the alliance that had formed in fire and necessity. After the initial battle at Vega Prime, 3 more major engagements had followed. Each time, human tactical knowledge combined with Zarthian technology had prevailed. 2 weeks ago, the Drax had finally requested peace negotiations. A hush fell over the assembly as Zeltan, the respected Zarthian philosopher, took the speaker's position. Once a skeptic about human inclusion in galactic society, he had become one of Earth's strongest advocates. "Esteemed members of the Council," Zeltan began, his melodic voice carrying throughout the hall. "One standard year ago, many of us viewed humans as an interesting but concerning species. Their physical adaptations to a harsh world were impressive, but their history of conflict troubled us deeply." Murmurs of agreement rose from many of the delegates. "We misunderstood humans fundamentally," Zeltan continued. "We saw their physical limitations and violent history as weaknesses. We failed to recognize that their capacity for both terrible destruction and profound compassion emerged from the same evolutionary crucible." The philosopher gestured toward Miller and the other humans present. "Humans are not simply warriors. They are beings who faced their own violent nature and chose to channel it, to regulate it, to build codes around it. They created rules for war not because they love violence, but because they recognized its cost." Miller listened, thinking about how far perceptions had changed. Just 18 months ago, the Zarthians had offered Earth protected status as if humans were children needing guidance. Now they spoke of humans with respect bordering on awe. "When the Drax threatened us," Zeltan went on, "the humans did not hesitate. They fought for species not their own, on worlds they had never seen before, and they fought with restraint, disabling rather than destroying when possible, protecting civilian targets above all else, and offering mercy to defeated enemies." The hall fell completely silent as Zeltan reached his conclusion. "I propose that Earth be granted full membership in the Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Further, I propose the creation of a new galactic defense force, with human and Zarthian leadership, to protect peaceful worlds from those who would prey upon them." The vote that followed was nearly unanimous. Species that had once feared or dismissed humans now saw value in their unique perspective. After the formal proceedings, Miller found himself approached by a small delegation of beings he didn't recognize, short, furry creatures with large eyes and 4 arms. "We are the Neri," their leader introduced themselves. "A scientific species from the far reaches. We have observed these proceedings with great interest." Miller nodded politely. "Welcome to Earth." "We have a question," the Neri continued. "Your Admiral Bennett stated that human military doctrine prioritizes minimal force. Yet your history contains weapons of tremendous destructive potential. How do you reconcile these things?" Miller considered his answer carefully. "The more powerful the weapon, the more important the restraint. We learned that lesson the hard way." "And this is why you created war crimes? To place limits on your own capacity for violence?" "Yes," Miller said. "Because without limits, conflict destroys everything, including the victor." The Neri discussed this among themselves in high-pitched clicks. Finally, their leader spoke again. "Fascinating. A predator species that developed ethics around predation itself." Before Miller could respond, the diplomatic reception was interrupted by an urgent message. The Drax delegation had arrived for the peace negotiations. The reptilian beings entered. Cautiously, their scales dulled from stress and their once aggressive posture subdued. Their leader, General Scar, approached the human and Zarthian representatives. "We have reviewed your terms," Scar stated without preamble. "We will accept the border limitations and the non-aggression pact." Ambassador Cluthac's eyes swirled with relief. "This is welcome news. May this begin a new chapter of peaceful cooperation." Scar's gaze fixed on Miller. "Your species fights differently than any we have encountered. You could have destroyed our ships, yet you disabled them. You could have refused medical aid to our injured, yet you provided it. Those are our protocols, Miller said simply. We did not understand at first, Scar admitted. On our world, showing mercy is weakness, but you showed both strength and restraint. This confused us. After the Drax departed, Ambassador Cluthac approached Miller privately. When we first met, I thought humans were dangerous children who needed guidance, the Zarthian said. I was wrong in ways I could not have imagined. Miller smiled slightly. We're still dangerous. Yes, Cluthac agreed, but dangerous in ways the galaxy needed without knowing it. The Drax are not the first aggressive species to arise, nor will they be the last. Later that evening, Miller stood on the balcony of the assembly hall, looking up at the stars. Grace Morgan joined him carrying 2 glasses of champagne. To unexpected outcomes, she toasted, handing him one. Miller took the glass. When I joined the first contact team, I never imagined this. None of us did, Grace agreed. The Zarthians thought they were meeting harmless primitives. Instead, they found their protectors. Maybe we needed each other, Miller suggested, echoing something he had said to Vexilor months ago. Their peace gave us something to aspire to. Our readiness for conflict gave them protection when they needed it. Below them, human and alien delegates mingled, exchanging ideas and building connections. Earth had found its place in the galaxy, not as a protected species, but as guardians. The humans who had once been dismissed as primitives from a death world had become the defenders of peace, their understanding of conflict becoming their greatest contribution to galactic society. They still don't fully understand us, Miller observed, watching a group of Zarthians attempting to comprehend a human joke. Grace smiled. Understanding takes time. But they're learning that being capable of violence isn't the same as being violent. That knowing how to fight doesn't mean you want to fight. Si vis pacem para bellum, Miller quoted softly. Exactly, Grace agreed. If you want peace, prepare for war. They finished together, raising their glasses to the stars.